All right, let's get rolling. We know this one, right? No free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people but by a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. That was put in every single state constitution. Isn't that amazing? Every state constitution. It comes from George Mason, Virginia Declaration of Rights. In Utah's Constitution, Article 1, Section 27, frequent recurrence to fundamental principles is essential. And you guys, in some states in their Constitution, it says frequent recurrence is absolutely necessary. If we're the boss and we don't know the structure, we don't know the government, and we're not reviewing the principles constantly, how do we expect to drive it appropriately? Government is like a 2-year-old. If you're not watching it all the time, and if you don't have backup to the backup to the backup, it's going to make a mess, right? If you're not watching the 2-year-old, it makes a mess. It's not the 2-year-old's fault. The founders knew government was just like a 2-year-old. If we're not checking and balancing and limiting and restraining government and it makes a mess, it's not government's fault, because we know that's what it does. And just like a 2-year-old, when it does get caught, the first thing it says is, "Don't see me." This is my little grandson, Henry, true story. There you can see his little panda bear up there on row 5, right? "Don't see me, Mom, don't see me," he says. It's just like government. If we're not watching it all the time, government makes a mess. It's not government's fault, because there's so many checks and limits and balance. We know right now government's making a mess. It's making a big mess. Debt, deficits, interest, the decay in government, all of the things that are happening. Just, it's like Will Rogers says, right? Will Rogers says, "I don't make jokes. I just watch what Congress is doing and tell the people," right? You just look around and tell them what Congress is doing. I don't need to make jokes. So we know that right now we're on path right now to leave things worse than we found it. That's like the number one rule of anything. Leave it better than you found it. And we're on path to leave it worse than we found it right now. So number one principle, right? When James Wilson is teaching George Washington and his cabinet, he says, the first and fundamental principle in the science of American government is that the people are sovereign. The first principle in our government, people are sovereign, right? So the analogy we talked about in week 1, if you're the boss, right? You're the boss and you don't hardly ever show up. You don't know who your employees are. You don't give them the job description because you don't know what it is, and you never follow up. It's going to fail. It's going to fail. That's how we, as the sovereign, as the boss of American government, that's how we're running this. About a third of us show up in a general election. We go red flyer, blue flyer. We don't give the job description to the people that we hire because we don't really know. Can we tell them what to do? Can we give them the job description? And then we don't follow up. Is it any wonder our government is off track? So that's good news and bad news, right? The bad news is it's bad. It's serious. 37 trillion, 38 trillion in debt, growing by more than 2 trillion a year. The interest alone, for which we get nothing, is over $1 trillion a year. It's bad. The good news is, so we're responsible for that. That's the bad news. The good news is we're responsible. We can do something about it. We have in our hands the ability to do something about it. So let's see how we do that. So we talked about principle 1. Principle 2, we talked about last week. It's the structure. It's the structure that secures our rights. Justice Scalia, the structure of our government is central to liberty. The separation, the divisions, the balance, the limits of the structure of our government is central to liberty. So we talked last week, right? This is what we learn in 8th grade, executive, legislative, judicial, right? We hear that and give me a gold star and I know government and off we go. And that's not our government. That's not our government. Madison says, in a single republic, usurpations are checked by dividing the branches.
I found this on the web. There's 37 trillion, 38 billion, 000, and debt growing by more than 2 trillion a year. The interest.
All right, Siri, thank you very much. How do I shut that up? Siri, be quiet, please.
So we're responsible. For that's the bad news. The good news is we're responsible. We can do something about it. We have in our hands the ability to.
She's going to teach the class, apparently.
Let's see how we do that. So we talked about principle. One principle. We talked about.
All right. Hey, Siri, be quiet.
The structure that secures our rights, justice. Scalia, the structure of our government is central to liberty, separation, and
Hey,
divisions
Siri,
to balance the
be
limits,
quiet.
but the structure of our government is central to liberty. So we talked last week.
Be quiet. Go away. Go away.
Okay.
Can't make that up, can you? All right, so let's go back here, right? In a single republic, the usurpations are checked by the divisions, but he says, in the compound republic of America, that's the name of our government. In the compound republic of America, power is first divided. The power surrendered by the people, because it all rests with you. Then the power that you give to government is first divided between two governments, so they can control each other as a double security to the rights of the people. Two governments, not one. That's the genius of America. This is American government. Not just this. We first divide power between two governments, and the power delegated is few and defined. It says in Federalist 45. The power reserved to the states and the people, numerous and indefinite. Have you ever seen a diagram anything like that about our government? Nowhere ever, right? We see this all the time, right? I mean, that's only like 15% of our government. Is it any wonder if we only learn about and focus on about 15% of our government that we might be a little bit or a lot off base? Imagine if you only knew about 15% of how to operate the car. Well, I know the door opens like this. I don't know what to do from there. I got this big old machine over here. I don't know where the on switch is, but I can see this thing. It's critical that we know. We haven't been taught our government. And our state leaders and our judges and our lawyers are only taught this in school. Rarely ever taught about the structure of our government. Is it any wonder we're a little or a lot off base? Freedom is enhanced by the creation of two governments, not one. In fact, they said that is the unique genius of American government. That was our unique contribution to political science, that we divide power between two governments. We split the atom of sovereignty. We're going to have to go fast to get. This is just a review, you guys. Now, you can go back and watch the videos at iGovern. You go into those tabs. But Madison tells us our government is characterized by being divided and balanced with limits and checks and restraints. It's critical that we know those things. That's like the gauges on your car. Is it divided? Is it limited? Is it balanced? Is it checked and restrained? And it's our job to make sure we delegate that. Kind of like the bicycle, right? If you got a front tire that's so bloated it's about to explode, the back tire is so flat it's about to chew the rubber off the rim, the answer is not to get a stronger rider or to steer it harder to the left or the right. Fix the balance in the tires, right? Few and defined over here, numerous and indefinite here. In the meantime, it doesn't matter if Trump or Harris rides the bike, if they steer left or right. We got to fix the balance in the tires. It matters first on the structure. I mean, it's if you have a president that has fewer powers and a Congress that has fewer powers, it matters very little. It used to matter very little. Our life wasn't existentially threatened by who was president, and that's why we're at each other's throat now. Because now we're fighting over who rides the broken bicycle, instead of saying, it doesn't really matter what you do, that's not going to turn my life upside down. Because most of what is government happens right here where I can keep an eye on it. Federal and state governments, they're just different trustees or agents of the people. Power resides with the people. Now this is where it gets fun. This is a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you guys. The general power of governing, that numerous and indefinite power, is possessed by the states, not the federal government. It's called the police power. The police power is to promote health, peace, morals, education, good order of the people, increase the industries of the state, develop its resources, add to its wealth and prosperity. That's all the jurisdiction of the state, not the federal government. So this is the blueprint. This is the job description that we give to the people that we hire. First thing is this. put that in balance, because until then, we're just fighting over blue king, red king. Instead of, I want to be able to have things where my voice matters. All right, and then how many of you remember we taught you how to memorize the Constitution in 4 words? You remember? Again, this is all just review. This is class 1 and 2. Remember the Constitution in 4 words? If government, which government? Right? If government, Ninth Amendment. Ninth Amendment says the powers enumerated in the Constitution shall not be construed to deny or disparage all others retained by the people. If we didn't give it to government, it stays right here. The people are the source of all power. If we didn't give it to government, you don't get to tell me how I do my hair, what I had for breakfast, what time I get up, what my job is, what kind of house where I live, if I go on vacation, if I name my dog Pixie Doodle Dumpling, whatever, right? I don't know where that came from. Most of what we do, government has no authority to tell us what to do in the United States of America. We gave government a very, very small amount of power. And that's the first one, if government. If we didn't give it to government, stop right there. We don't ask that question nearly enough. If we did give it to government, which one? Government far away, less accountable, less transparent, we delegated very few powers. Government close to home, numerous and indefinite, so we can have meetings like this. You can go to the Capitol. You have control over the things that affect your life and your liberty and your property. That's how our government was designed. All right, this was your homework from last week, right? Your homework was to explain to someone the difference between a compound republic and a single republic. Right? What's the difference? If you were to just describe that right now, how would you describe the difference between a compound republic and a single republic?
Well, a single republic is just one big country, and all the, whether they're states or provinces or whatever they're called, they're kind of like little, all of them together bigger. So,
Yeah, single republic, just one big government, and all the states and whatever are just administrative subdivisions, right? Compound republic, 2 governments, and they control each other. Not top down, which is what we're taught. It's not top down, it's 2 governments. And if you think about it like a partnership, the federal government is the limited partner. The states are the general partner. Most of what we think of as government is to happen in the states, where it's right where we live. That way, Idaho can be different from Utah, from California, from Texas, from New York, and that's okay. And we band together to make sure we don't get attacked by China or Botswana or whoever, right? Yeah.
But the state cannot make a law or do anything that violates the principles of the Constitution and the federal government.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that tonight, and we talked about it a lot last week, so I'd encourage you to watch class 2. Jurisdiction, right? And it depends on which government has jurisdiction, and that's the authority to decide. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg says a law that violates the Constitution, no law at all. So where the federal government is out doing things that it's not anywhere delegated to it in the Constitution, it's just wasting breath and paper if the states are doing our job. And they counted on that, right? They counted on that jealousy. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. And then we just went through memorizing the Constitution, right? Does that make sense? If government, did we delegate it to any government? If not, stop right there. If we did delegate it to government, which one? Which one? And that is so critical. And it just gives us a framework for analyzing. So tonight we're going to talk about the states are, just like we were talking, we're going to talk about the states are responsible for this balance, for restoring and maintaining that balance, which means in class 4, 2 weeks from now, the most important hire we do are our state agents right here, because they're the ones that are supposed to control the federal government, right? So we'll get to that in week 4 and then week 5. All right, so by the end of tonight, if I do my job right, you're going to know why it'll be the state's fault if they allow the federal government to interfere in the state's jurisdiction. And you're going to be able to teach people at least 8 of the powers, the tools that the states have to keep the federal government from interfering. We're going to actually talk about 7 because the 8th one we don't really get into unless it gets really, really, really bad and we've used all of them. We'll talk about that here in just a second. All right, you ready? This is class number 3. Now again, you can get here in this learning tab, you can get this online workbook. You can see the videos and watch them over and over again. But that workbook, we go deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm just giving you an overview here, unless you want to stick around for 3 or 4 hours, and I'm happy to do it. But you could go deeper and deeper here, right? And you can get more and more information. You get the quotes and all of that. So you guys, 2017, I was speaking in Des Moines. It's like 3 days before the 2017 legislative session. And I got the flu, and I was sick as a dog. I just wanted to get home, and I get to the airport, freezing rain. The plane is stuck, you know, it's just Iowa. There's this rain all over there. We sat. Finally, the plane takes off, and I've got to connect through Minneapolis. I'm thinking, man, I'm going to get stuck in Minneapolis. Now I'm going to be there instead of getting home. I'm like, I just want to get home, right? We start to land in Minneapolis. I'm kind of jockeying to get off the plane, and this guy stands up, and he just fills the whole plane. You know, that whole thing in there. He's just this big, bright red T-shirt, this University of Utah T-shirt, right? I'm thinking, that guy's going where I'm going. And I kind of jockeyed to get off the plane to kind of get behind him, and I'm just running behind him. I didn't even ask him, you know, if he was actually going to Salt Lake. I just figured University of Utah, he's going to Salt Lake. And I'm running behind him, and he's running and carving a wave through the people. And we get there just as they close the door. And if they close the door, you're done, right? And so we get there just before that. They sit us in the exit row together. And turns out he's the linebacker coach for the University of Utah. But he played for BYU, right? And so, yeah, it's not him. But so then he asked who I am, right? And I said, I'm Ken Ivory. I'm in the state legislature. And invariably, you tell them you're in the state legislature. The question is, what do you guys do? Right? We know about Congress. What do you guys do? And so I'm trying to explain to this football guy, right? Last week talked about the bicycle. Now I'm the football guy. And I said, okay, well, that BYU-Utah thing, that's a pretty important game, right? I mean, the Holy War, right? He's like, yeah. I said, okay, the whole week is kind of different, I'll bet, huh? You know, the practice is probably different, the media. He's like, yeah. I said, all right, I want you to imagine Saturday morning. And you're there, and the coach gives you the most fiery speech you've ever heard in your life. And you're just all pumped up to go play this most important game you've ever played. And you run out of the tunnel, and the stadium just, it's packed. And you get out on the 50-yard line, and you get ready to go, and you buckle your chin strap, and you get down, and you get ready to go. And you look down, there's no lines on the field anywhere. He said, oh, that'd be a disaster. I said, yeah, that's what government's like today. There are no lines on the field. We're supposed to have this healthy competition. We don't know what the line of scrimmage is. We don't know what first down is. We don't know what out of bounds is. We don't know what the goal is. We're just running around on the field like 5-year-old soccer, right? Y'all just, you know. I said, I'm working to paint the lines on the field so that we know the lines and the limits and the boundaries. He's like, oh, I get it. When you hire people to represent you in the state, their job is to paint these lines on the field. You can't defend a line you cannot define. If you hire people in the state and say, go push back against the federal government. How far? Where? What? With what? Where? How? What do I do? You can't defend lines we can't define. It's our job to help them define the lines because there are no classes. There's nothing that does that. You might be shocked, right? You get elected. There is no instruction on what these lines are. It's up to you. Now, we're working on that with this federalism initiative, but that's up to you. Thomas Jefferson, it's important to strengthen the state governments, and it must be done by the states themselves, erecting such barriers at the constitutional line that cannot be surmounted either by themselves or the general government. It's the state's job to erect these lines, to put these lines back on the field. This is just last year, the Loper-Bright decision. The federalism canon, now this word here, canon, that means the rule of construction, how you interpret the Constitution. I had about 100 government lawyers in D.C., and I asked them, how many of you know the federalism canon? Not a single hand went up. It's not taught in law schools. The federalism canon tells courts to not to presume that federal statutes do not preempt state laws because of the sovereignty that states enjoy under the Constitution. To your question, right? To presume that federal statutes do not preempt state laws, that's not taught in law schools. It's not taught to state leaders. Certainly not taught to federal leaders. They come out and say, supremacy, you lose. And that's where they start. It's not taught. And so if you don't know the lines on the field, we're just running around. This is the U.S. Supreme Court. They have said repeatedly, states form distinct and independent portions of the supremacy. No more subject within their respective spheres to the general government, the national government, than the national government is subject to them within its own sphere. When it says supremacy in Article 6 of the Constitution, that's only to the laws that are in pursuance of the Constitution, not everything. The federal government is only supreme in those limited things delegated. But if we don't know, we can't defend a line we can't define. Supremacy, think about that. We don't talk about that word very much. Highest authority or power, holding the highest place in government or power. States form distinct independent portions of the supremacy. This is John Dickinson. He's one of my favorite founders along with James Wilson. He was called the penman of the Revolution, the Pennsylvania farmer. He says the government of each state is and is to be sovereign and supreme in all matters that relate to each state only, and subordinate barely in those matters that relate to the whole, and it will be their own fault if they allow the federal sovereignty to interfere in the things of their respective jurisdiction. Again, to your point, right? Oh yeah, there's a couple other slides that are in the workbook I took out. They're great quotes, but anyway. So you guys, I'll share with you a spiritual, mental, emotional scar that I carry if you promise not to tell anybody, all right? I had a nickname as a child, and I hated it with a passion. I still hate it. It just, my sister and my cousin gave me this nickname, and it was just terrible. I still hate it. So you promise not to tell anybody, I'll share it with you, all right? Nickname was Chunky. Isn't that terrible? Chunky as a kid, right? Chunky. I hated it. There's only one redeeming quality from being chunky. And it was when we did the tug of war, I got to be at the end of the rope. And I'd just tie the rope around, I'd just sit back, and if we got pulled in the mud, it'd be over by the time I ever got in the mud. I never got muddy at all. Otherwise, I just hated that. But our government is supposed to be like a tug of war. Healthy tension. They intended our government to be that way. Almost like if you think of the Golden Gate Bridge, right? You have that tension that holds the whole thing up. Without that tension, it just collapses. And so when people think, your state's rights and you're pushing back, yeah, we're supposed to do that. Because that's how we determine that line and keep that flag nice and taut right over that balance that is supposed to be in the Constitution. That tension was intentional in the way our structure was designed. The Constitution divides authority between federal and state government for the protection of individuals. Federal and state governments are pulling against each other. We're fighting over who can protect your rights the best by limiting the power of either one. Not by growing it the most, not by giving away favors the most, but by keeping government limited, keeping the other from taking too much power, and keeping the rights protected the closest to the people they possibly can be. That's the competition in our government. How are we doing? Right? 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 Well, overall, right? I mean, overall, our entire structure, and it's because we're not taught. We don't study these things. We're not doing that frequent recurrence to fundamental principles that Utah's founders and every other state's founder said, frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. We don't talk about this stuff at all in state government. You get elected and you go, I know government. I won an election. I had a better flyer than that other person. I know all about government. And we all went through the same schools that don't teach this. So if we're not, I mean, hairdressers have to have continuing education, right? Lawyers, doctors, electricians, plumbers, but not the people that hold your life, your liberty, your property in your hands. Don't you think that is absurd? So that's where you get to speak up and do something about that. That's where this bill that we just passed, Utah's the first state in the nation creating that continuing education course right now. And the summit that we have next week, we're going to invite other states to join us. It already passed unanimously.
What was it?
Unanimously. House Bill 488, unanimously. And then if you guys don't mind, I'm going to kind of rush through this a little bit so we can film it and get it and keep it recorded. And then I'm going to answer all your questions at the end. I'll take as long as you want. So write them down and take note of that. So right here, this is not taught either anywhere. The tools, the powers that states have to restore that balance, it's not taught. Wouldn't you want to know that? If there's supposed to be a certain balance, wouldn't you want to know the tools that you have to do that, right? It's not taught. Professor Nadelson, he's one of the most individually cited people by the Supreme Court. I asked him for a meeting that we had if he would create a list. Now, I don't suppose this is all of them, but this is a lot of them. And he takes it right from James Madison, and we'll look at James Madison directly as well. But he says, here are some of the powers the states have. Public relations. We can teach just like this, right? Imagine if all the state leaders really knew that structure and we went out and taught all of our constituents. It'd make a difference, wouldn't it? And if we went out and taught the judges and we taught the lawyers and we taught the businesses, it would make a difference. This is their power. This is our power, right? Lobbying Congress, states as a group, as a block. We just did that this summer. The big, beautiful bill was going to keep states from doing anything with AI. And the states all got together. In fact, one of our freshman representatives, Doug Fiafia, kind of led the charge and went out and said, no. States as a block can lobby better than anyone. Judicial challenges, now that's the one we think about. Let's go file a lawsuit, and we think that's the only tool in the toolbox. It's an important one. It's not the only one. State legislative action. I'll give you an example. In 2021, in the Biden administration, the EPA issued an edict, unelected agency issued an edict to shut off all coal-fired power in Utah by 2026, 5 years. 80% of our power to shut it off in 5 years. We couldn't have done it if we wanted to. Never mind, there is no example of a large city or a state completely going to renewable energy sources. We couldn't have done it if we wanted to. And so we just looked at the police power is possessed by the states, not the federal government, right? There was a case, West Virginia versus EPA, that said energy is at the heart of the police power, that general power of governing. Energy is right at the heart of that. So I did a bill in 2023 that said right in the bill, the police power, this health, safety, welfare, general power of governing, is possessed by the states, not the federal government. And the Supreme Court just said that energy is at the heart of the police power. You don't have the authority to make that decision. Again, right to your point. You don't have the authority to do that. And so we said if any federal agency comes in and instructs anyone with respect to power, we'll take it to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General will take it from there. Bill passed. They didn't challenge it because that's our authority. But if we don't know, rights we don't know, no better than rights we don't have. Rights we don't exercise are no better than rights we don't have. So legislative action, we think about that. Coordination among the states. The more we work together, that's what this summit is about next week. The more we work together at states. That tug of war, right? It was supposed to be 13 sets of representatives against one. Now it's 50 sets of representatives against one. And I'll show you some quotes here in a second where they said it would be no contest. Article 5 is right in the Constitution. I'll show you some things on that in a minute, but there are two ways to amend the Constitution. 2/3 of each House of Congress can propose an amendment, 3/4 of the states ratify. Or, on the application of 2/3 of the states, Congress shall call a convention for proposing amendments. And the states meet to discuss, should we propose an amendment? If they do, 3/4 of the states still need to ratify. We've never done the second way. We've done the other one 27 times, but states have the ultimate sovereign power to propose and amend. So that's one of the powers in there. And then nullification. I'm going to show you a quote here in just a second on that. I keep hitting the wrong button. Nullification is just kind of the same thing. You don't have the authority. And instead of them coming in saying, hey, supremacy, you lose, in our states, we need to get in the habit of saying, would you show us where you do have the authority? Because the way this is designed, you're the limited partner. You have few and defined things. You show us where you have the authority. We don't ask that often enough. If they don't have the authority, again, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a law that violates the Constitution, no law at all. But we don't even ask these questions because if we don't know there's a line there, how are we going to defend it? And then revolution, Madison talks about that. We don't even talk about that until we've used all the tools in the toolbox. We've worked together as states. You know, the Declaration says they have the right to alter and abolish and all the rest. Not if we haven't used the tools we already have. So that's why I've got that one shaded out. We don't even talk about that one until we've done all the things we have. Now look at how they talk about the powers of the states, right? When they were ratifying the Constitution. State governments will have the advantage of the federal government in the dependence of one on the other, the weight of the personal influence, the powers respectively vested in one or the other, the predilection, probable support of the people, the disposition and faculty of resisting and frustrating the measures of each other's. The state will have the advantage of the federal government. Does it feel like that today? Because we've not, rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have. Ambitious encroachments of the federal government on the authority of the state governments wouldn't excite the opposition of just a single state or a few states. It would be signals of general alarm. Every government would espouse the common cause. A correspondence would be open. Plans of resistance would be concerted. One spirit would animate the whole. Get this one. Think about how much they meant that balance of power. The same appeal to a trial of force would be had in the one case as was made if there was a foreign invasion. If the federal government intrudes on the states, we're going to treat that just like if China invaded. That's how much they meant that balance of power. One set of representatives contending against 13, now 50, the whole body of their common constituents on the side of the states. They said it would be no contest. Hamilton says the same thing. It may safely be received as an axiom, a truism in our political system that the state governments will afford complete security against invasions of the public liberty by the national authority. It's self-evident. The state governments, they'll afford complete security if the federal government were to interfere in their rights at all. Now, this is where we talked about the Article 5 thing. Tench Coxe in the New York Ratifying Convention, he says, the sovereign power of altering and amending the Constitution, which is truly and evidently the real point of sovereignty, is vested in the several state legislatures. The states only can execute these acts of sovereign power. If 2/3 of the legislatures require it, Congress must call a convention. If 3/4 of the states ratify it, if they approve the amendments, they become an actual and binding part of the Constitution without any possible interference of Congress. I had a couple years ago, Speaker Schultz went down to the border to see what was going on there, and he came back and he was like, you guys, it was worse than I could have imagined. He's like, countries are literally emptying their mental hospitals and prisons and sending them to our border. And he says, but there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a federal problem. And I raised my hand. I said, Mr. Speaker, I support you. I'm so grateful for you, but I respectfully disagree. If 2/3 of the states submitted an application to amend the Constitution and 3/4 ratify it to amend the Constitution regarding, immigration, it would become a binding part of the Constitution without any possible interference of Congress. He says, Representative, you're correct. I stand corrected. But if we don't know, rights we don't know, rights we don't exercise are no better than rights we don't have. This, you guys, this is in Utah code. I don't know if it exists anywhere else. When I was running for office the first time, and I'm going to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution, I was just plagued with what power do I have to do that? What right do I have to do that? What line am I defending? And I would ask people, well, what are all the powers delegated? Oh, that's in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. I'm like, well, those are some of them, but there are powers in, other sections and in Article 2 and Article 3, and where's a complete list? It didn't exist, and it doesn't still, to my knowledge. That book that I forgot to bring this time, I'll put up a QR code, that little Where's the Line book, was a book that I wrote to myself. It was the job description to myself. And together with Rob Nadelson, that scholar that I showed you before, and David Barton, some of you know who David Barton is maybe, we created a list of all the powers in the Constitution delegated to the federal government. In every article of the Constitution, in every amendment, and we put that in Utah Code. I think we're the only state that's done that. So 63C 4A301 is the standard for evaluating federal law. It's right there in our code. Those are all the powers delegated, and if it's not that, then it's reserved to the states or to the people. It's right there. And so refer to that. Again, the job description that you give your leaders, it's right there. We put it in Utah Code, and you can share that with others. Now, this is also something that we did in our Federalism Commission. We funded, and to Utah Valley University, their Center for Constitutional Studies, we created a Federalism Index. Federalism is about limits and division and balance. Those are all measurable things, right? If there's a limit to something, if there's a balance to something, those are measurable. And so we created an index to see, well, is this balance of the government's good and getting better? Is it bad and getting worse? And on this website, you can see that. But then even better, this federal policy tracker, you can track all of the federal actions that purport to cross the constitutional line. Now, they're not going to make that decision. They're just listing up, hey, these are things that are executive, these are legislative, these are judicial actions that you may want to look at as crossing the state-federal constitutional line. Remember, Jefferson said it must be done by the states themselves, erecting barriers at the constitutional line. We've got UVU creating this analysis for us, and you can click on those and go in deeper and see why it is likely to, why it does or doesn't cross that line. But they flagged all these things for us. And here you can pull it up by our standing committees, maybe. What just happened? I don't know what I just did. You could pull it up by our standing committee. So you can pull it up by, show me all of the federal intrusions in education, or in election law, or in business and labor, or natural resources. Show me all the executive actions related to education, all the judicial actions related to transportation. You can do all of that right here. And so we're doing that, and that's available to every state. We created that here in Utah. And then this year we passed that federalism amendments that creates the continuing education annual summit of states, and then to create a national federalism watchdog to watch that barrier. And that passed unanimously, you guys. This is structure. This is not politics. So here's the Chief Justice again. Our cases refer to this general power of governing that's possessed by the states, but not the federal government, as the police power. Now, remember, police power is not just cops and guns and that thing, right? Police power is the name for the general power of governing. It includes the health, safety, welfare, education, resources, grow the economy. All of that is called the police power. Think of the military policing the area, right? That's the police power. Possessed by the states, not the federal government. The framers ensured that the powers in the ordinary course of affairs that concern your life, liberty, property, that's held by governments more local, more accountable than a distant federal bureaucracy. Because if it's federalized, you lose your voice. If the federal government takes it away, you lose your voice. You lose your ability to have impact on that. So it's supposed to be more local. Get this one. In the typical case, so remember that nullification thing? In the typical case, we look to the states to defend their prerogatives by adopting the simple expedient of not yielding to federal blandishments. I had to look that word up. They don't teach it in law school. Blandishments means coaxing, coercing, forcing, cajoling. Not yielding to federal coercion when they do not want to embrace federal policies as their own. That's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you guys. We look to the states to not yield. Now get this, it gets better. States are separate and independent sovereigns. Sometimes they have to act like it. That's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court saying that balance is critical. Don't just come and ask us. We're a catcher, not a pitcher. It's your job to protect your jurisdictional line. Separate, divided from the rest, parted, disconnected, disjoined, right? Independent, not subject to the control of, not subordinate, not subject to the bias or influence. Sovereign, highest authority, supreme in power, superior to all others. This is the one I like right here. I think you have to do a Superman pose when you look at this one right here. Supremely efficacious, right? That's the states. That's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court saying, that's the states, not the federal government. When have you heard that? Where have you ever heard that? That's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Why are we not talking about this? So you guys know, right? You go out to the beach and, you get the little pails and you build the sandcastle and it's all nice and beautiful. And then you go to get a hot dog or a soda pop and you come back and the tide has just washed it out. So, of course, what do? You just build another sandcastle right there in the same spot, don't you? That's what we do in our states. We got to build a seawall. We've got to build that seawall. That's what that jurisdiction is. That's that line that Jefferson is talking about. It must be erected by the states themselves at this constitutional line. Then we can build these beautiful sandcastles for education, for health and welfare, for transportation. And they don't get washed away by the federal tide by people that can't pronounce Tooele or find it on a map to save their lives. Right? That's the way that this is supposed to operate. So here's what Hamilton says about this. I used this in my first election. This was the quote I used at every house. It didn't matter, Republican, Democrat, whatever. Whatever their issue was, Hamilton said, we may safely rely on the disposition of the state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. He said, that's my job. If you don't like the fact that we're growing the debt by $4 million a minute, my job is to erect barriers. If you don't like them intruding here and those kinds of things, my job. Now this is Madison. So when they ratified the Constitution, there were many that were concerned that there wasn't a Bill of Rights. And some said, we don't need a Bill of Rights because if it's not delegated, then it's not theirs. We don't need to worry. If it's not in there, they don't have it. Well, we should have a Bill of Rights to make sure. And so the only way they ratified the Constitution to get enough states was a commitment that they would do a Bill of Rights. So in the very first Congress, Madison introduces the Bill of Rights. And in doing that, he says, the state legislatures will jealously and closely watch the operations of this national authority. And they will be able to resist with more effect every assumption of power better than any power on earth can do, because they're the sure guardians of the people's liberty. Your state legislatures, the sure guardians of the people's liberty, because they live right in your neighborhood. They've got to stand for election every 2 years or 4 years. They've got to be closely connected to what you're concerned about. And they've got all those powers to be able to resist these encroachments if we teach them who they are. If we teach our agents the power that they have and what they're supposed to do, because it's not being taught anywhere else. And when you hire someone, you hire right and you train right, and then your job becomes easy. You don't hire right, you don't train your employees, you're playing catch up all the time. And so that's our opportunity, is to hire, train, and sustain the people right where we live to keep this government in balance. And if we don't, then it's job of the Fed, like we looked at before, right? I always like this George Washington. I think about this all the time. George Washington, I mean, if you've ever been to Mount Vernon, just that sense of this indispensable man. He said that the necessity of reciprocal checks, right? The limits, the divisions, the balance, the checks, the restraints in our government are so essential that for you to preserve them is as necessary as it was for us to institute them. Think about that. For you, right now, right here, to preserve the structures, the limits, the divisions, the balance in the government was every bit as necessary as anything he did, is what he's telling us. because that structure was so incredible what they did. So if I've done my job right, then you should be able to explain to your friend, your neighbor, your spouse, your children, your dog, your cat, your gerbil, your hamster, whatever. Why will it be the state's own fault if they allow the federal government to interfere in their sovereignty? What power do they have to do anything about it beyond just filing litigation? You go back and pull the slides and watch the video and get that workbook, and you'll be able to do that and teach them that. Here's some cheat sheets you can look at. There's some things that you can get to do that whole code section that we have in there. And so here's what we know. We know that you're the boss so far. We know that it's the structure that is exceptional. 2 governments, not one. And we know that the states are responsible for that. And the state's doing that so you can lift right where you stand. It's the structure that secures our rights. Not next week, because we're off next week because we've got the summit, and I'll tell you all about it in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, next week we'll play a video. So if you want to log on, and we'll have a video going, and you can watch that. But in 2 weeks from now, we'll talk about then why it is so critical who you hire as your state representative and your state senator and your attorney general and your governor. Because these are the people right here that you can talk to, you can associate with, you can give them the job description. And so the character that they have, the knowledge, the skill that they have to be able to do this difficult job is critical. It's not just who has the most, the prettiest flyer. We need to hire people that actually know what this job is. Then the week after that, we're going to talk about how do we actually delegate our sovereignty and our sovereign responsibility to and through them. And then in week 6 is how we leverage our voice. That multi-level liberty to make this happen. That's when we can get into these impact councils and you do your job in 5 minutes a week. 5 minutes a week. Can you guys still spare 5 minutes a week? If it means fixing our country, right? By understanding these things and then in these impact councils working together, leveraging our voice, 5 minutes a week we can restore that structure. We're seeing it happen already. All right, so this is the rest of that quote to Scalia. The structure of our government is central to liberty. Not the politician, not the policy, the structure. And when we destroy it, we put liberty at peril. We can't do that because you're the answer to doing this, and we all have someone like this in our life. We all have someone like this. My little Henry, I'm going to go see him week after next, right? His little sister's 2nd birthday. But we all know that we're going to face 2 questions, right? We know that it is serious right now. Bad news is we're responsible. The good news is we're responsible. And we're going to face 2 questions from them. Did you see it coming? And you did because you're here, right? And the next question is, what did you do about it? Get online, get on the workbook, watch the videos, come back in 2 weeks, and we're going to get to the point that we can do this in 5 minutes a week. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you're here because none of us can do this alone, and I'm counting on you to help me and help you so that we can do that for all of our grandchildren. Thank you very much.